Hi, good morning. My name is Richard Pensak, and I am mostly responsible for the Northern Pacific Sea Star response with Earthcare St Kilda. If you are watching this, it's because you have some sort of interest in what we are doing and you are looking to help us with our Northern Pacific Sea Star response. So if that's you, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Um, Look, I know a lot of people who have this um, are seasoned veterans and you understand what we're doing. This video is still really helpful just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody understands what's happening. But it is designed more for those who are new to Northern Pacific Sea Stars and new to conservation in general, I suppose. So please feel free to watch it at whatever playback speed makes sense for you. It's just a good check-in, I think. Also, I'd like to begin by um, acknowledging that this land that we are on was never surrendered, and I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and to Port Phillip Bay, which is the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung clan of the Kulin Nation. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, Northern Pacific Sea Stars, otherwise known as Asterias amurensis. They arrived here in Tasmania in the 80s from Japan, Korea, the Northern Pacific. In Tasmania, they're a pretty serious problem, as they are here, but I don't know that there'll ever be an end to the problem in Tasmania. What happened is quite early, the response was to catch them, chop them up, and throw them back overboard, which led to exponential growth. I think from all reports that I've heard of Tasmania, it's Northern Pacific Sea Star held down there. I've never seen it myself, but I don't think we're at that point yet, but I also don't think we're at any point where we can foresee ever being rid of these creatures. So one of the most meaningful parts of what we're doing is to try to keep them contained within Port Phillip Bay. Um, they have been seen in San Remo um, and Wilson's Prom, but they haven't survived there. They haven't taken a foothold. So if if you ever see them anywhere outside of the bay, we absolutely want to know about it. I would consider that an emergency, and we want to know about it straight away. There's no absolutely no reason why these animals wouldn't do very well in Sydney and even further north. So the fact that they're contained in Tasmania and Port Phillip Bay is fantastic, and we want to keep it that way. So that's just a little bit about Northern Pacific Sea Stars. I think it's important that we look at some of our native animals first, just to get a sense of which animals we don't want to take. And these animals are good for the ecosystem. Although someone asked me recently, what eats this? No, that's not what they asked me. They asked me, what role do sea stars play on the ecosystem? And I found it really interesting question. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I would almost consider sea stars to be an apex predator. I can't think of a thing that really eats them in a convincing way, and most sea stars don't seem to have much to them. Um, it's very beneficial for other animals to eat. Most sea stars are carnivorous. So, they're, they're echinoderms. They're related to sea urchins and sea cucumbers. If you fold up the legs of a sea star, kind of looks like a very close to a sea urchin, and if you stretch that out, it looks very close to a sea cucumber. So they're just carnivorous animals that exploit the environment. There's no thing that says they have to have an ecological benefit. So, but when they have a serious ecological detriment, that's when we need to act. Also, just to create to preserve opportunities for our native species to flourish. Okay, so These big biscuit stars are one of my favorite stars. I find them really cute. They're quite small, perhaps the size of a peanut butter lid at the biggest. They come in really varied sort of colors. Um, Sometimes they're quite bright, like bright orange. Um, but yeah, they're pretty varied. Tosia australis. There are very similar looking biscuit stars. Like the Tosia magnifica. It's sort of like the Tosia australis has been put in a panini maker. They're more flattened. They do have a little bit of a central disc, but not really. It's nothing defined. Their body structures are very similar. So they're still in the biscuit star family, and they still eat the same sort of things and exist on the same sort of substrates, which is rocky reefs and kelp forests. Although these Tosia magnifica will eat plants, but both of them will eat tiny organisms and things like that, ascidians. There's another sort of biscuit star, which I would love to see. I haven't seen it, but it does exist in Port Phillip Bay. It's often called a fire brick star, Pentagonasta juvenile. Obviously, the pent is from the five rays, and that exists in sheltered waters as well. Onto the carpet stars, Meridiastra media exists in intertidal rock pools up to a few meters deep. It can be hard to spot, but it is certainly around. It's certainly present. Maybe you would mistake it because of its sort of blobular form. You might mistake it for maybe a sponge or something like that if it's clinging to a rock. But that's indeed a sea star. It's very closely related to this, the Mediastra calcar. So it's similar to the Mediastra media, but it's more tuberous and the arms are more pronounced. You see tons of these. They tend to aggregate together underneath piers on rocky substrates. Certainly plenty of them around Frankston, between Frankston and Mornington. There's just absolutely tons of them. Um, I find them pretty. They they have varied colors as well. 8 to 10 arms. Sometimes they're completely blue. Sometimes they're completely brown. So that's the 8 arm carpet star. Okay, 11 arms. Um, this is a an interesting animal. So they always have up to 11 arms. They are huge. They're about as big as a hubcap, if not bigger. Um, these 11 arms tend to aggregate around piers. So they're always clinging onto the pylons, obviously feeding. Or they're on in sort of sandy, sort of sporadically around the sandy areas. Um, the issue with these is a lot of people have misidentified them as the invasive species, but they're absolutely not. They are an important part of our ecosystem. So why? How did they get that reputation? It could be because they slightly resemble the crown of thorns in Queensland, which has got a lot of press. Um, it could be because some people don't find them that attractive. They look a bit scary, but a lot of fishermen leave them on the piers to dry out, thinking that they're doing the right thing, but they're absolutely not. So, and also in their juvenile form, they quite frequently get confused with Northern Pacific sea stars, but that's why it's really important to count those number of rays. They eat very similar foods to the Northern Pacifics as well. It's bivalves, ascidians, and sponges. Okay, onto the sea stars that actually have 5 arms. So they're probably more likely to be confused. The granular sea star, it's usually found solitarily on rocky reefs and in sheltered habitats. You can see that the ends of the arms are quite rounded and it has these quite bulbous globs all over its body. It's bright orange, pretty hard to mistake this one. Um, Okay, the pseudo Nepanther. Um, it's called pseudo Nepanther because it looks very similar to the Nepanther, which it can be confused with a lot. This one's in Port Phillip Bay though, so it's on exposed coastal reefs about 70 meters deep, or as deep as about 70 meters. And it feeds on sessile creatures, so things like barnacles, things that are attached to their substrate. Um, the next one, the Nectria, macrobrachia. It's on exposed coastal reefs near the heads. I have not been lucky enough to see one. I've only dived outside the heads once, but if you are diving deep near the heads, there's a good chance you can see these animals, and I would keep an eye out for them because I think they're quite lovely. Note that almost all of these five-armed sea stars have had just sort of rounded ends to their rays. Um, when you see Northern Pacific sea stars, you'll see a difference there. I did throw this one in. No one's confusing a brittle star with a Northern Pacific sea star, but I love them. They're just so wonderful and they're so tiny. I don't know, maybe they're big. I've never seen one, and I wanted to put it in just in case if somebody's diving with me and you see one, please tell me. This one's obviously on the lip of a scallop shell or something like that. Um, and the arms can be up to 5 centimeters long, but I would just absolutely love to see one in the wild. So please let me know or send me your photos. I'd love to see it. Northern Pacific sea stars. Okay. So the first thing to know about this Asterias amurensis is they have a very well pronounced central disc from which the five arms radiate. That is a very strong defining feature that none of the stars I've shown you so far have. The big telltale sign though is these upturned uh, tips, the slightly curled tips to the ends of the rays. Um, they're the Northern Pacific sea stars have this adaptation that I've seen them do where they pull their arms up and forward and they sort of roll their whole body into a ball and they ride the waves in. So on in bad weather or um, high current or high waves, they'll actually roll into a ball and they'll exploit that power of the ocean and then they'll flatten themselves back out and they'll gorge themselves in a bivalve bed. Try saying that 10 times fast. So yeah, that's a real defining feature of these animals. And also just the number of rays. I mentioned earlier that they have 5 rays. They can have up to 5 rays, but certainly no more. If there's more than 5, it's not a Northern Pacific sea star. However, that central disk, as long as part of that is attached to a broken off ray, the sea star can grow the entire animal back again. So that's a very important feature is it's no more than 5 rays. Finally, on the flip side, we have water-filled tube feet, and they have quite strong suckers on them. Um, and in the middle, we have what's both a mouth and an anus, and it's also where the eggs spawn from. So the Northern Pacific sea star can use the tube feet. They have quite strong suction, particularly when lots of them are attached, and they can prise open a bivalve, and then the entire stomach comes out of the animal, and digestive juices. If the animal's too big for the sea star to engulf, the digestive juices can start to digest it outside and then bring it back inside. So it's quite a remarkable and scary way that they predate. This is just an example of a sea star that only has, I think I can see a sneaky limb in the back there, sneaky ray. So this is a four-limbed one, and it's in the midst of growing back its fifth limb, so it will be happy to thrive again. That's for sure. Um, so why do we respond to Northern Pacific sea stars? Why do we care if there's more sea stars in the ocean? Northern Pacific sea stars can adapt to a variety of conditions. So they prefer cooler water, but they are totally fine with warm water. Um, they tend to drive themselves out into the deeper water during summer, and I guess they feed out there. And then when the water gets cooler again, in the middle of winter, they come back to shore, and that's when they begin to broadcast spawn. So that's a real danger, and it's why we really want to have our 7 mil wetsuits ready for the middle of winter because that's really when we want to be getting them. If we can't get them before that because they're too deep, we sort of need to be ready. Because they're going to broadcast spawn everywhere. Just another note about that. When you collect Northern Pacific sea stars, it's really quite important that we then wash all of our gear in fresh water because if we're covered in eggs and we go diving at another site, we don't want to spread those eggs around everywhere. Okay. Northern Pacific sea stars are prolific breeders. So the reports that I have is that an individual Northern Pacific sea star can produce up to 20 million eggs. It's an insane amount of eggs. And just in the stack on this picture, on this slide, it's an insane number of potential offspring. So that's a big reason why they have a danger. And the final reason is Northern Pacific sea stars are not fussy eaters. They'll eat anything they can catch, and they are absolutely not particular. They have definitely got a penchant for bivalves, and within the bivalve community, specific bivalves they prefer, but they will eat anything, including each other, and they're not predated on by many things at all. The 11 arms will nibble on them. Apparently, the spider crabs will eat them, but the spider crabs are here one day, gone the next. The 11 arms don't make enough of an impact. It's not a fast enough impact. So it just makes them it just makes Northern Pacific sea stars all the more dangerous because they're adaptable, they can breed fast, and they can eat anything. It just means they are happy to find a niche where they can, which equals danger. This is just an example of how you can see the tube feet actually grabbing onto the outside of the shell and prizing it open. And this would be one of those cases where the whole stomach is coming out of the animal and digesting the bivalve here um, outside of the body before it brings it in. So yeah, it's quite remarkable. Actually, this photo is speaking volumes to me. It's just an example of if the shell is too big, then they'll actually get inside and they'll still win that battle. I think the next one's really interesting. This is a F. tunicustata or a blade cockle, and I picked this up on the beach, and I was interested in it. I could feel that the animal was still present, so I wanted to show somebody what it looked like. And lo and behold, when I opened it up, have a look. That's Northern Pacific sea star, and I was shocked, and I kind of realized that I guess the F. tunicustata was still fighting for its life and it kind of closed itself in on top of the sea star. So both animals lost this battle, but it looks like they're pretty voracious. I can't believe that that's what I found inside it. I was absolutely blown away by this one. Um, okay. And I just wanted to, this is actually a dead Northern Pacific sea star, which I opened up. We were inspecting it to see if it had eggs at this time of year, and it didn't. But you can see the tissue around where my index fingers are. That is called coelomic epithelium. So it could be confused for eggs, but that's what's inside all of the rays. It's a tissue layer that covers the dorsal side on the inside of the rays. This tissue responds to stimuli by extensive cell proliferation. It's also involved in wound healing, regeneration, and hematopoiesis, which is the formation of blood cell components. So it's that coelomic epithelium which gives the sea stars their superpowers. It's really important to them, and it's what helps them regenerate their limbs and regenerate their entire body structure because that organ is going through the entire body. So it really doesn't matter if one limb is gone. It's sort of like it they can just grow it back. It's going to be exactly the same sort of strength and exactly the same efficacy for the animal. Okay, under here we have This is what we found under Seaford Pier when we were doing a collection. So this stack just stretched on and on. It was between the pile, not the depth of water. The pile of sea stars was between 15 to 20 centimeters deep, just sea stars stacked on top of sea stars, and it stretched for well over half the pier, because it extended beyond the end of the pier. Um, so you could extrapolate that it was uh, well into the hundreds of thousands of animals, and it was an insane infestation that we were shocked to discover. Um, so I just wanted to re-stress that if you see a sea star outside of Port Phillip Bay, please report it. Please take a photo of it. Um, if you see them within Port Phillip Bay, please report it. Please take a photo of it, even if it's just an individual. Even if you don't think, if you're not sure that it is a Northern Pacific sea star, I absolutely want to know about it. So if you send your report to nps@earthcareSt Kilda.org.au, I will receive it. Otherwise, please feel free to report it to marine.pests@ecodev.vic.gov.au. That would be absolutely fantastic. Okay, when we run our events, what does it look like? Okay, so what we've settled on is we're going to run these events on the third Saturday of every month between 10 and 12, unless otherwise advised. The location is going to be advised within a few days of the event because the nature of uh, the Northern Pacific Sea Stars, they can be here one day, gone the next. Um, and also the weather is really important. The weather might cause us to either change the location or to change the date, but you can pretty much put in your calendar the third Saturday of every month. If we can't find any animals, we'll do some activity. We might have a fun snorkel. We might do a gear check. We might just have some sort of a community connection. So we'd love to see you. We'd love to see everyone. We can get better at the way we run these. They've been pretty crazy and look, we're still finding our feet. Um, in an ideal world, we're with the event starting at 10, we would have an activity briefing at about 10 past 10. And that is important because we won't always be in a beautiful spot like Seaford Pier where there's no real hazards. There may be hazards to talk about, there may be currents to talk about, there may be people who aren't strong swimmers, there may be adverse weather approaching that we want to stay ahead of. Also, I might have been surveying the area, I locally will have been. So I might want to give you tips about where to go and where you're going to find the most animals and where we're going to have the greatest effect. So just a brief briefing would be an important component to include in these activities. And a plan. Some people have suggested to me it would be a good idea for snorkelers to form a line and sort of cover the area that way. With a huge aggregation, it's sort of irrelevant, but if there's not that many, that's a fantastic approach. It's also really important that we point out who our first aid trained people are. They'll usually be in a high vest jacket. So it's just really important to touch base and to connect. But most importantly, something we've been missing a lot lately, please sign in and sign out. It's so important. We want to know if you're coming and we want to know that you've arrived, mostly because if there's a missing person, how are we going to know about it otherwise? So it's really up to everyone to be responsible for themselves, but if you don't sign in and you don't sign out, we can't go looking for you. And in the case that you haven't signed out, I can call you and find out if you're okay. So I would absolutely love to stress that please sign in and please sign out. It's just a matter of writing the time that you left and that, or just letting somebody know that you've left. That would be fantastic. Thank you. Okay. When we're in the water, excuse me, um, we are doing a physical removal of Northern Pacific sea stars. It is up to your discretion if you wish to wear gloves, but as you can see in this picture, that's 2.5 meters deep. Repetitive duck diving over 2.5 meters, and you're trying to pick up maybe 5 to 10 animals each time you duck dive, has a physical toll. It would be my preference if you could self-organize into buddy groups of two or three with only one catch bag. So you have one person duck diving and the other person is staying on the surface. The reason why that's really important is because those surface intervals um, really add to your recovery time. So you get a chance to rest, relax. You're also holding the bag for someone, which can be physically straining. They do fill up and they do get heavy. Um, and then when you're duck diving, you will have a better breath hold. You'll have better peace of mind. And I just think it's incredibly important that we do this in the safest possible way. The ultimate preference would be not to have to collect animals from this sort of a depth, but sometimes we will have to do that. It's just so important that we do it together and safely and with a buddy at all times. Um, Okay, there's another way to do physical removal, and that's just in the shallows. A lot of my area where we've been conducting these events a lot, the Northern Pacific sea stars are right there in ankle deep water, waist deep water, knee deep water. You can use a grabber if you like. There's no reason to suggest that the Northern Pacific sea stars are going to do any damage to you. We'll have gloves available as well. And it's actually quite fun, especially for kids. It's a sort of like a little Easter egg hunt. It's a lot of fun. The next most important component of these collections is the data. So we sort them out by size. Um, the most important reason I want to do that is because I want to know how many juveniles there are versus how many adults. So lately, we've had no adults. An adult would be considered to be anything greater than 10 centimeters. Um, if we've got no adults, then, and we've got tons of Northern Pacific sea stars, there is no reason why we need to do this. We can count out 100 10 times, so 1,000, and get an average weight of 100 sea stars, and then we can just weigh them and extrapolate by size. I have no problem with that. They're usually quite similar in size. If they're really varied in size, then we'll go ahead and count them. Um, but not like if we have an outbreak like we had last time with 45,000. I'm not going to hang around and wait for 45,000 sea stars to be counted, so we'll just wait them. Then what? What do we do with them? Um, look, after they've been anesthetized, um, we've got to do something with them. We are looking into what's the best use. There's nothing in them. They're not good for the garden. There's just no nutrients in them. You would think something that eats so much would be full of good, great nutrients when they decompose, but it's not. They're not good as a pet food. I don't think they're toxic. My dog has eaten about 10 of them. He's a stealer, he's a thief. They just go in the FOGO, they go in the council bins. Um, yeah, I would like to improve that issue, but right now, I have no ideas. So that's it. That's it. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening to me. And I would just like to stress um, how fun it is and how much of a community connection it is. I think the people we do this with is wonderful, and every time we add a new person, it just builds to our resource pool. Everyone is so um, giving and accepting of each other, and it's just a beautiful activity. And thank you for being interested and wanting to come with us. And we are so thrilled to do this with you. Stay tuned. Third Saturday of every month. Can't wait to see you on the beach. Let's get wet.